Hey guys, it's Bree here with Blossom and Branch Farm, and it is early in the morning and we are going to walk around the field today and we're going to show you some of our favorite things that we use as cut flowers that also double as edible herbs in the garden. So if you're tight on space and you know you want pretty things that you can cut and use in the garden, but you also want them to do double duty as an herb, today's your video. Let's go. So over here we have oregano, and oregano obviously very popular for cooking with, used in a lot of Italian dishes, very strong scent, but little known that it makes a really great cut flower. So you can see it puts off these really cute little white buds. Now this is just regular Greek oregano, and if you let it bolt, this is really kind of the bolting stage of the herb, it gets these nice tall blooms. Now this oregano is in its third year. So the first year, usually they stay low to the ground. They kind of do this creeping growth habit, but then starting in years 2 and 3 is when they start to elongate and you can cut them for the vase. So not only do they have a really great cut vase life, they also are a great herb to have in the garden. This is not the only variety of oregano that we grow. We actually grow 3, so let's look at the other 2. One of the other varieties that we grow is this one called Kent. It's also sometimes called kirigami, and you can see it makes these really neat, they almost look like hops flowers, and they have this tinge of purple as they get a little bit older. Now this is as tall as we've ever gotten them to grow. These ones stay a little bit shorter, so maybe maximum of 8 inches tall, but this still works really well for bud vases or smaller centerpieces. And also it works really well if you are doing farmer floristry and you want to be making boutonnieres or corsages. This one works really well because oregano holds up very well out of water. So it's one that we tend to use for things like boutonnieres or wrist corsages. You could even use it for floral crowns, and it also dries really, really beautifully. It holds up really well as a dried flower. It's not one that tends to break a lot. And it just looks really interesting and different. We always get comments on this one, but again, it doesn't get as tall. So just bear that in mind when you're placing it in your garden, that you're not putting it behind something else that's going to shade it out. Let's look at the third variety of oregano we grow. This variety of oregano is called Harrenhausen. This one is great because it blooms purple. So this is year 2 for this oregano, and you can see in year 2, just like the other oregano, how nice and tall these stems get. And the difference between this oregano and the Greek oregano is the color. So this one, you can see it makes a purple flower up at the top, and actually these flowers get larger even as time goes on. They hold really well on the plant, which is something that I love in a cut flower. Some of the cut flowers that we grow, like dahlias, we have to cut immediately as soon as they're ready. That's not the case for this oregano. We have quite an extended period where we can cut the oregano flowers, so it really extends our harvest. We also like the foliage itself. So the foliage of this one is this really bright, pretty lime green, and the foliage holds really well in a bouquet, so it's a good filler. It's also a great flower, and you can use it edibly, which I love. Right next to me, you'll see one of my other favorites. This is attar of roses geranium, also called rose geranium. It smells amazing. So if you rub the leaves of the rose geranium, it smells like roses. It makes a really great herbal tea. It also makes one of my favorite simple syrups. So we'll just steep it overnight in some hot water and sugar, and in the morning it tastes like roses. It's a really great plant to have. Right now it's still in its kind of shorter stage, so you can see when we first plant it, especially, it's a little bit on the shorter side. So as the season goes on, it does lengthen out and it will bush out. It's been an unusually cold year, so it's taking its time, but you can see we're almost getting to this stage where we're going to be ready to harvest this. Now it does get these little pink flowers. We don't really usually harvest it for that, but if they happen to have some on there, that's always a perk. So really this one is mostly grown for the smell, and geranium also propagates really well. So at the end of the year, we can dig up some of these plants, take cuttings, and continually replant it because it's not perennial in my zone. This one we have to replant every year. Let's pop over to the chamomile. One of my favorites, chamomile. Now this is German chamomile. What we really should do is invest in a chamomile harvester because it would make it much easier to come along and pull these. But what I do is I just grab them between my fingers and pop the heads off like that. And then we can dry these and use them in teas. We can use them in simple syrups. We can use them to infuse oils for salves. And they make a really cute pop of yellow up at the top of a bouquet. Now these ones for us usually tend to kind of fizzle out toward midsummer. So we've already done one harvest of this chamomile. We will probably come in and do another one where we'll pull at least some of these flowers to use in bouquets, and then we'll also grab the rest of the heads to use to dry, because this does reseed prolifically. So you can see even a patch like this is going to give us a lot of chamomile, and I don't want to let it go to seed because it will reseed itself quite happily. Let's pop over to one of my other favorites. Anise hyssop, as you can see, is really popular with the bumblebees. There are so many bumblebees on this morning. And that's because it's a native. So this is a North American native to a lot of North America. And it especially does well here in Colorado. It doesn't mind our dry soil, it doesn't mind our clay, and it gets these really pretty purple spikes on top. We've mostly been leaving these for the bumblebees, much like the milkweed that we grow, because our native pollinators really need these kinds of plants. The specialist bees really need these specialist plants that they are specifically evolved to use for nectar. So we leave a lot of these, but they have the great perk of the leaves being delicious. So we will pull these leaves every once in a while. I actually like to just snack on them in the field. They're a little bit sweet and they taste kind of like licorice. They also make a really great simple syrup. I'm just watching this little So this is a great one. It got very tall this year. Actually, normally it's not quite this tall, but we had a lot of rain. I think normally we usually top out around here. We'll cut this back and we'll usually get at least a little bit of a second rebloom if we do cut this back. But right now we're just gonna let the bees enjoy it. This is Monarda. And this is another favorite because this is also a native pollinator plant. So native to our area and native to much of North America. It is really wonderful for teas, and it makes this little purple flower. Now, the flower itself isn't all that impressive, but again, this one we mostly grow for the bees, but you can also use the leaves for teas or simple syrups. This is actually my favorite bee balm down here. There's another variety that we grow. This is called bee balm lambada, and this one is actually a little bit more tolerant even of dry soil. So it makes this really interesting shape, and I kind of call it the Dr. Seuss flower. This one isn't quite as popular with the bumblebees, although I do often find them sleeping on the bottom, on the underside of these. And this can be used the same as that bee balm Monarda. You can use the leaves for teas, you can dry them, you can use them for simple syrups, you can use them for salves. So this is a really great one, and I think it's a really interesting one to grow in the garden. Now this one isn't strictly an herb, it's really more of a vegetable, but it is one that I grow and I use the top. So this is fennel, and fennel is non-native, but it is really great for pollinators like swallowtails. And it's also a beautiful architectural flower in the garden. However, it will reseed itself very prolifically and happily. So if you want to grow fennel, I recommend cutting it before it goes to seed stage. It also does happen to make a really great cut flower. So the benefit of this plant is that yes, it attracts pollinators, and it also attracts a lot of beneficials. So we often find a lot of little hoverflies and other things on this plant. The stems, as it gets more mature, are nice and firm, and so they hold really well in a vase. It's a fun little pop of color. So this is a good alternative to the Golden Alexander. The Golden Alexander being the native one that we grow. That one usually blooms for us early summer, and then this one kind of fills in more toward midsummer. All right, back to the last one we're gonna talk about today, which is mint. And mint is one that you have to be careful with because it will spread. This is what happens. You have to plan to have it in one container. Now, in hindsight, it was probably a mistake to plant this anywhere where it has contact with the ground because it will spread underground via rhizome. And rhizome meaning that it's going to spread wherever it can. This case, it's not spreading beyond the raised bed because it's surrounded by rock, so it's not as problematic as, say, planting it in a soil area or near other raised beds. But it will start to spread. The longer this is here, the more it's going to try to get out of this bed. So we're actually going to probably be taking a lot of this out this year. However, I wanted to show the stage at which you cut mint. So if you have mint, you know, you can cut it prolifically, it will keep coming back. But we like to wait to cut it until it starts to put off this bloom. And if we wait long enough, it will actually bloom white here up at the top. And it adds such a nice scent to bouquets, which is why I love growing mint, even if it is aggressive. And we'll cut it when it's nice and woody. So you can see how firm this stem is. If you cut it too early when the stems are still weak, like this one, it might wilt on you. So we really prefer to wait and cut it when it's nice and thick like that stem is. and then it will hold for quite a while. And this one holds really well in heat. So that's really nice when we're cutting in the summer and using these for bouquets. We want something that's gonna hold up really well to hot temperatures. Now there is another herb that we usually grow, which is basil. We just didn't grow any this year. I think my seeds didn't germinate. I can't remember why I didn't grow it. But usually we do grow basil as a cut, and we just wait for that basil to become woody. So a lot of times basil, if you cut it early, it's going to wilt. So what we do is we wait for that basil to get a woody stem and usually to start to flower, and then we cut it when it's nice and woody, and then it has a much better vase life. So if you're growing basil as a cut flower, remember that. Well, that's it. The sheep are yelling at us, so we're gonna go get them fed and get a harvest done. Thanks for joining us this morning. And if you like this video, remember to like and subscribe. It really helps us out here at the farm, and we appreciate you being here. See you next time.